everyone. How are you doing today? Welcome to the MudRoom, our weekly free and live uncommon sense parenting class. How's everybody doing today? I don't know what it is about Wednesdays lately. They used to be my easiest days, but somehow lately everything happens on Wednesdays. Like, even random stuff that isn't scheduled. Like this morning I was on the phone with my son's kindergarten teacher when we realized that somehow the school board has somehow combined my two kids into one person and then split them apart again and enrolled them in both grade 1 and kindergarten. So now both my kids are enrolled under the same name and I have to sort that out. Like, okay. I mean, it's 2020. I can't even make this stuff up anymore. Nothing, I don't know, am I jaded? Nothing surprises me anymore. Like, it just gets put on the to-do list, and then you can't look at that list too closely, or you'll go kind of insane. Am I the only one? Like, how? Okay, but upside, my oldest read his first book today. I was doing my makeup this morning and he just waltzed into the bathroom, plunked down, read a level 1 book cover to cover. So I'm pretty stoked about that because a month ago he was running away and screaming whenever I even suggested that we read to him. So, you know, you lose some, but then you win some. You gotta take the good with the bad. Hey, Angelina! Hey, Maddie! Maddie's first time catching a live class. Yay! I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so before we get started on our topic today, allow me to introduce myself for those of you who are new around here. Hi, I'm Allana Robinson. I'm a parenting coach for parents of toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergartners, and I help you understand why your children are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. I'm your host here on the MudRoom. I'm also the host of the Parenting Posse Facebook group, and I'm the creator of the Parentability program where I help you raise well-behaved kids of your own. So if you're watching, please say hi, just like Angelina and Maddie. Let me know how you're doing. It looks like I've got the issue with the comments sorted out. For the last couple of weeks, it hasn't been showing me comments till after I end the video, and then they all pop up at the same time. But I can see 2, so that means we must be good to go now. Computers are supposed to help us. And, you know, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that you like and subscribe so that you never miss a class. I know a lot of you up until now have been relying on my little AI helper Possebot to remind you that videos are happening. Unfortunately, Facebook changed the rules. I can no longer send out event notifications over Messenger using a bot or otherwise. So, unfortunately, we've had to retire Possebot. He's no longer, he, she, it, is no longer available to us to remind you about these classes. So if you want to get reminded about them, the best way is to make sure that you're subscribed to live stream notifications for the Uncommon Sense Parenting page, because that way Facebook will remind you before each of our videos goes live. So today what I want to talk about is the quote-unquote terrible twos. 2 is a hard age for everybody involved. And I get that the term terrible twos is supposed to be like humorous and kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I firmly believe that words have power. And I don't think that the label of terrible is actually helping anyone. In fact, I think it sets a lot of parents up for failure because our thoughts create our reality. If we're expecting something to be awful and hard and stressful, it's going to be. Whether it actually is or not objectively. By looking at anything through the lens of this is gonna suck, it is going to cause it to suck because of how we interact with it. The problem that I have with the label of terrible twos is that it sets you up to be dismissive of your child's behavior. They're just terrible. They're irrational. They're manipulative. They want to rule the roost is one that I've heard a lot lately. They're demanding, they're defiant, they're shrill. It's just because they're 2. What I rarely hear when discussions about terrible 2s come up is, why are they those things? It's like everybody believes that 2-year-olds want to be miserable. Let me ask you, the last time that you were miserable, did you enjoy it? Did it feel good? Did you want it to continue? No! Nobody does. It feels awful and you want to do just about anything to feel better, right? So what makes anybody think that a 2-year-old enjoys being miserable? They're not aliens from another species. They're just tiny humans. They have the same feelings and wants and desires that we have. So why are 2-year-olds miserable so frequently? There is a reason for it. And I'm going to tell you what that reason is, because I know from experience that knowing what is going on under the hood is the key to being the best parent that you can be. It is so much easier to cope with, to parent, and to troubleshoot behavior when you know why it is happening. And I promise you, if you take this information and apply it to your parenting, your 2-year-old will stop being terrible. I loved it with both of my kids. I've loved it with every kid that I've worked with. It has got to be the absolute best age. And before I had my kids, I loved caring for and doing early intervention with 2-year-olds. They were the bomb. Nobody knows how to have fun like a 2-year-old. If you know what is happening with them developmentally, and therefore how to work with them instead of against them. Hey, BB! Hey, Heidi! Yay! Okay. Let's dive in then. So, the first thing that you need to know about 2-year-olds is that right around their 2nd birthday, they have a whole whack of developmental changes going on. The first is a language leap. Okay, so the area of their brain that deals with language just explodes in volume practically overnight. Very much like how in a 4-year-old we're always talking about the limbic leap and how their amygdala just explodes in volume overnight. Same thing with their language centers, which is why typically speech intervention doesn't really happen before the age of 2 unless there's like an observed motor planning issue. So there's like a physical weakness or difficulty forming speech. But around age 2, it's like their brain just gets it and suddenly they're just talking up a storm. So they've gone from being able to express very little to being able to express a lot more, practically overnight. But, big but, they can't express everything yet. Okay? Expressive language is typically about a year behind receptive language. So they can understand way more than they can actually talk about. And that is super frustrating. They have all these big thoughts and they can't get them to come out of their mouths. I don't know if you've ever been in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, but it's got to feel like that. Where, you can think these big thoughts and you can't get anyone else to understand them. It's frustrating. And it takes so much more energy to just get through your day. I remember when I went to Spain with my parents when I was in grade 10, and I don't speak Spanish. Nobody in my family speaks Spanish. I speak French, which has a lot of similarities, but not enough that they're interchangeable. And I remember wanting to get just a cup of tea, and I couldn't make the waiter at the cafe understand what I wanted. Eventually, he brought me a tray with a glass of water, a glass of juice, and a bottle of Coke, and just indicated that he wanted me to point. And I remember getting back to the hotel and being like, oh my God, all I wanted was a cup of tea, and that was exhausting. That took all of my energy, and I got nothing accomplished. It's the same thing with 2-year-olds. They're still learning language, period. They understand what they want, but they aren't necessarily able to get the words to come out of their mouths that match that desire. And then to make things worse, sometimes they do, and we deny it to them, and they don't understand why. They can't even conceive that you've given them water when they asked for juice because they've had too much sugar today. Right? That is an adult concern that they just cannot wrap their head around. It is just so developmentally inappropriate. They just assume that somehow the communication broke down. So it's so important that we slow down and that we give them other ways to communicate with us that don't rely on verbal communication. Okay? Use visuals. Use sign language. Their fine motor skills develop way faster than their oral motor skills. Make it easier for them and slow down. So many parents I see are just firing information at their twos so fast, and they get overwhelmed and then they break down. Slow down. And the good thing is that using visuals and signs forces you to slow down as well, because you're not as efficient at using them. So that's going to make you clearer. Okay? Slow down. Don't just rely on talking at them, because they're not very good at it. Baby says, doesn't hurt that they're super adorable. Yes, that is I call that their defense mechanism. That's how we make sure that they stay alive. The second leap that 2-year-olds are going through is one of self-awareness. So they're becoming aware that they aren't just one being with their parents, okay? You can't read their mind. And you can actually separate from them and be doing things without them when they aren't with you. It's kind of like the second wave of object permanence, right? When they're 6 months old and they discover that an object exists even if it's out of sight. So until then, they've understood that, like, you don't walk away and die. You just aren't with them. But that's really it. You just kind of go away and you're in another room and then you come back. Yay! But once they turn 2, they realize that you're doing shit without them in the other room. And they want to be involved. They want to know what's going on. Toddlers learn best through observation. Why can't my mouth do that word today? Observation. There we go. So they want you to do everything and to watch you do everything, and then they want to try and do it themselves. They're very hands-on learners, and they have a whole whack of FOMO. And it's scary. Up until now, they've believed that you're somehow tied to them. That they're kind of like always with you in a sense. And now they realize that no, you can actually not come back. They are their own person, completely separate from you, and they have different thoughts and feelings from you. And that's terrifying. That's a huge realization for a very little person. So they're navigating that cognitive awareness of self and other, and that too takes up a ton of energy because they now have to actively monitor you. Think of back when you were like 9 or 10 years old. You're old enough to be aware of some adult concerns, but not all adult concerns by any means, right? And it's not that you're stupid. It's just that you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know about you, but when I think back to being 9 or 10, I'm like, damn, ignorance was bliss. Everything was just so much simpler when I just didn't know. And it's the same for a 2-year-old. They just don't realize at 18 months that you were separate from them, and now they're more aware, and therefore they have to use more energy to keep on top of things. So we've got 2 new huge energy drains on 2-year-olds that weren't there months, weeks before. And finally, we have the fact that their executive functions are just coming online. Okay? This is a huge cognitive leap that also kind of ties into the self-awareness bit that I just mentioned. Executive functions are the mental tools that we use to do basically everything. There's 8 of them. Impulse control, emotional control, working memory, task initiation, self-monitoring, organization, flexible thinking, and planning and prioritizing. So you use a combination of those 8 skills to do quite literally everything. Like putting on your shoes. Well, to do that, you need to stop doing what you're doing, and you need to shift your attention towards putting on your shoes. That's flexible thinking. You need to then think about where your shoes are. That's organization and working memory. Then you need to think about the order of actions that you need to do to put the shoes on your feet. That's planning and prioritizing. Then you need to go get them and do it. That's task initiation. And then you have to keep track of where you are in that set of actions and what to do next. That's self-monitoring and more working memory. So that one simple request of put your shoes on has now taken 6 of the 8 skills in order to do it. But these skills develop over time. It takes till we're 28 for them to finish developing. So for many of us, we didn't even have fully developed executive skills when we had our firstborn. So a 2-year-old is just starting to develop them. And generally, the way that we develop these skills is by trial and error and practicing. And it's normal for us to be really naturally good at some of them and not be so hot at others. So a 2-year-old is just figuring out how to do all of that. And we're there demanding that they use them all day long. It's exhausting for them. Any one of those skills, if it's weak, the whole chain breaks down and they can't do it. And the only way that they have to express that, because now they're low on energy, so their language has gone offline, is to be emotional about it, to react like a baby would. Because they're still babies. They're only 2. They're still babies. So they've got all this going on at the same time. And we're putting bigger and bigger and bigger demands on them, which drains their energy, and then bam, meltdown. And then bam, another meltdown shortly afterwards. And then bam, another meltdown shortly afterwards. And we get more and more frustrated, and they get more and more exhausted and dysregulated. And here's the thing. The more often that you're dysregulated, the more you default to being dysregulated. It's called canalization, okay? Like digging a trench, digging a canal. Think of it like a trickle of water running over a rock, okay? If the water flows over the rock and then dries up, the issue gets resolved. No harm, no foul, right? But if that water keeps flowing over the rock in the same way, it will start to wear away the rock and form a divot, a trench. Now, unlike rocks, brains are plastic. They bounce back. If the dysregulation gets resolved and emotions stop flowing down that synapse will eventually die off. It'll get pruned. But if the dysregulation keeps flowing down that synapse, it just keeps getting thicker and stronger until it's the path of least resistance. Just like if the water keeps flowing over that rock, eventually the trench gets so big that that is the only way the water can flow. So the more terrible your 2-year-old is, the more terrible they're going to continue to be. And that's often why I have clients coming to me with 3 or 4-year-olds that say they've been this way since they were 2. And I always kind of take a deep breath when I hear that, because I know when I hear that we now have to undo 2 years of canalization. This is why I'm always saying, come join Parentability when they're 2, because it's easier to raise strong children than to fix broken men. Thanks for that quote, Frederick Douglass. Smart man before his time. If your 2-year-old is quote unquote terrible and you're sitting there hoping that they're going to grow out of it, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's probably not the case. It's not going to get better on its own. It's far more likely to get far worse, because there's a whole whack of development when they're 2, and then there's new development when they're 3, and then the limbic leap hits when they're 4, and guess what? If your 4-year-old has strong, established canalization, that limbic leap is going to hit you like a Mack truck, and it's going to keep hitting all year long. That trickle of water turns into a raging river. It doesn't get better, it only gets worse. And it is so much harder to fix. It's not impossible. I have plenty of parentability members who have done it very successfully, and who are doing it. But not a single one of them would tell you that it's been easy. It takes way more effort than helping them just develop their executive functioning and self-regulation skills from the get-go. So can we please stop calling 2-year-olds terrible? They're not terrible. They're dysregulated, they're scared, and they're frustrated. And this is why it's so important to know what's going on under the hood, because if you know what's going on, you're going to be way more empathetic. You're going to have more developmentally appropriate expectations. You're going to realize when they melt down over the same thing over and over that you're starting to build a canal, and that you need to solve this miscommunication or pattern of dysregulation, which will prevent that canalization. So that when all that messy development simmers down, you do actually come out the other side. Your toddler is actually a joy to be around, and you get to have fun with them and enjoy their toddlerness. Like I said, nobody knows how to party like a 2-year-old. And I think that's the reason that Terrible Twos makes me cringe, because it tells me that you're not enjoying parenting your toddler, which means that you're not going to enjoy parenting your preschooler or your kindergartner or your school-age child. That's how words create our reality. So if you've got a 2-year-old and you're aware that they're already getting canalized into dysregulation, you're already struggling to enjoy them, I want to invite you to my free workshop on how to raise well-behaved kids without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. In it, I go more in depth on how stress, skills, and critical thinking, which we didn't talk about today, all work together to help your child behave well. And the link for that is in the description, and so is the link for the Parenting Posse, where I would love to continue this conversation with you. Maddie gave me that little emoji with all the little hearts around its face. I love that one. Hey, Brittany! So does this make sense? Do you kind of understand now why being 2 is kind of terrifying, and that we should really be a lot nicer to them? When you understand what's going on under the hood, you're just going to naturally use strategies to help reduce that stress, right? It's like when your husband says to you, why didn't you tell me you needed help? And you're like, I'm gonna strangle you. Why should I have to ask for help? Because he doesn't know what's going on under the hood, right? He doesn't know all the stressors that you're dealing with. If he knew, then he'd just jump in and help. And it's the same thing with toddlers. If we know what's going on in their little brains, then it's a lot easier for us to jump in and help. It's a lot easier for us to make those connections for them, instead of just repeatedly doing what doesn't work. That's insanity. All right, that's it for me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. I'm crossing my fingers that there's no more weird crap that happens with my kids' schooling. And I will see you next week for another Uncommon Sense parenting class. Bye.